In conversation with Aurelia Young. Aurelia Young is a debut author from the Netherlands who published a first book called Blood Ink on the 5th of November 2023. She is an independent author who designed the cover, translated the story from Dutch to English, and promoted the book herself. Her aim is to write books that contain strong female characters for the genre young adult fantasy or science fiction. She writes as a hobby next to a full-time job in a medical research lab. In future, Aurelia wants to write a science fiction book using her knowledge about biology for the story. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have on the show today, Aurelia Young. How are you doing, Aurelia?
I'm doing very fine. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you on the show today, really, and it's amazing. We're gonna be having a conversation around your book, and I want to say you such have an amazing bio. I love the fact of you writing a book in the future about your knowledge of biology. Sounds great to me, really.
Yeah, I think sci-fi and biology can be combined very nicely. And
That's nice.
yeah,
That's great. So, Aurelia, could you tell us about your book, Blood Ink? I'd love to ask you, how does this book come about? What inspired you to write this book?
I will start by answering your last question. So, what inspired the making of Blood Ink? It's actually a very gradual process because I started writing on a very young age, about
Mm.
13 or 14 years old. And then
Oh,
yeah, I started with just a rough draft of 20 pages, and then I thought, okay, this is my book, perfect. I never have to change anything. And then a few years later, I looked at that draft and it was like, oh, this is a horrible story. And then I tossed the whole draft and started again, and I did that a few more times until I finished Blood Ink. So it was more of a hobby and a gradual process.
mm.
And yeah, about Blood Ink itself, um, it starts a bit dark. So the main
Oh,
character has a grandmother, and the grandmother gets murdered at the start of the book. And the
wow.
police thinks that it's a robbery gone wrong, that there was nothing in the house, and that they were angry, and that is why they
Oh,
murdered the old lady. So they were very sad. But at the start of the book, her father decides to move the whole family into the house of
mm.
the grandmother because it's closer to work and stuff like that. So for a very simple reason, and that's also
Wow.
why or how Aurelia at that part finds out who the murderer is of her grandmother,
Mm.
because around the house and at her school there were a few guys just loitering around, just hanging around, and they found out that she lives in that house and that she's the
Oh,
grandchild of her. So they were after a book in that house, and so they said, okay, we want that book. And later on they found out that she's the only one that can read the actual book, so that is where the
wow.
story starts.
That's
they
it.
they yeah, they kidnap her to a whole new world, and that's where the fantasy part starts. So it starts in this world and then it proceeds in the fantasy world.
That's actually amazing to know, really. And I love your short description of how all of this come to be. And to even have the book titled Blood Ink sounds quite, figurative to me. That's such an amazing title, really. And I wouldn't know
Yeah.
if you would love to talk about how the title come to be. Would you love to talk about that?
Yeah, it's actually related to that book from the grandmother. There's some
Oh,
information in that book, and it's very precious. So that's why the grandmother made a copy of the book, and she wrote it in blood ink.
oh, wow.
So and that is why well, blood ink is ink that is made with the blood of the person, but and then there's a magical spell that um, makes sure that nobody else but um, the children of that person can read the
Mm,
book. So only her
Wow.
family members can read the book, and that is why it's called Blood Ink. So it's
Wow.
actually very at the start of the book, you introduce the name of the book.
Wow. That's quite great to know, really. I love your
Yeah.
take. I love your take on that.
Yeah.
Love your take on that. And I'd like to ask you, in case of readers who haven't read the book yet, and without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what we'd expect in terms of themes picking up
Yeah,
Blood Ink?
definitely. At the start, there's a bit of young adult vibes. So perhaps at the start, people will think, okay, this is not for me. But
Oh,
whenever she gets dragged into that other world, there's, well, first of all, the book is of course written in blood ink, so that is already a
oh,
little bit dark.
wow,
And along in the story, there's also blood magic. So it gets
wow,
gradually on, it gets darker and darker. So that's why it's dark fantasy, and it's um yeah, you can call it young adult. It's also, I believe,
mm,
in the young adult section,
genre.
but it's mostly, and in the end, it's
Yeah,
dark fantasy.
yeah. That's amazing, actually. That's pretty much amazing to me. And your response to that actually want to make me to ask you about how long it took you to eventually write this book to the publication time, and also what made you go in the session of being a self-published author, if you'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, perfect. I actually don't know how long it took exactly because I started over multiple times.
Oh,
Um, but I think I started writing during my last education, so I think it
oh,
took mostly 4 years.
wow.
And it was mostly during the evenings after school or during
Mm,
vacation times or
mm,
holidays that I wrote. And after I had got my first full-time job, there was also a lot of writing in the evenings, and that also because yeah, we had just some more spare time. We didn't have any homework anymore, and we didn't have
oh,
presentations or reports to make. There was just a lot of time left to write. So in the past year, I really wrote, well, at least a year before the 5th of November,
mm,
I really wrote the final part of the book because that was still something that I couldn't do. It was really hard to. I had a beginning, I had a middle part, and I had a start towards the ending, but the ending just wouldn't want to come to me. So it was really a hell. Multiple times I had to start over. And so I think approximately 4 years that I was
wow.
actively writing. Yeah.
Well, I think it's actually a good number of years because I know that writing actually is not an easy task. It's a lot of work really involved in the process of writing a book, putting the words together, finding the right words, trying to see if everything flows on truly. Yeah, so that's quite commendable, really. I need to commend you on that. That's quite commendable, truth being
Yes,
told.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
uh, but I did it really as a hobby. So
yeah,
it was also
absolutely.
relaxing for me to
Mm,
write and to just put your brain on
mm,
off, I mean, and then just write. So it was yeah, relaxing for me. But it took a
yeah.
long time to relax.
Yeah, that's quite great, really. And actually, your response to that want to make me to ask you, because I've always been fascinated, surprised by how authors, especially novelists like yourself, craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that eventually makes a great novel. And sometimes this leaves me thinking about how exactly did they get the idea to write this book? Where are all of these words coming from? How can someone sit down, compile words from chapter one to chapter two to three to four, and eventually you have an amazing story, you know, flawless. And I'm like, wow, this is such an amazing one, really. And that will want me to make you to ask you that as far as writing is concerned, How do you get your inspirations and ideas? Where did they come from?
I think mostly watching movies and
Yeah,
reading
manga.
in the same genre as you are writing. But sometimes it also helps to read something completely different, and then sometimes there's just an idea of a scene that
Mm,
pops up in your mind, and then you know, okay, this is what I can also use for the book.
absolutely. That's actually great, really. I'm excited to hear about that from you. Because, everybody have their own different style when it comes to getting inspiration. I've got to ask some people and they'll tell me that, well, Peter, I get my inspirations from dreams. I get it from what I've seen around me, from personal experiences, from what I've seen in the environment, in the surrounding, and I thought, why not write a book about it? So it's quite lovely to know you get your own inspiration from movies.
Yeah.
Sounds great,
Yeah.
really.
One other thing that I got the inspiration from was that the first draft started with um, an idea of, because I never knew one of my grandfathers, and that is how I started
Oh,
the the book. So it is one personal thing that yeah, got me into writing this book, where I started, and that is also why the grandmother that started in the book was single. She didn't have a husband, so that is
oh.
also how, yeah, I did not describe my. I did have photographs of my grandfather, so I didn't describe him as on the photos, but I did, I don't know, describe him how he used to be according to a mom.
Mm.
So that was one
Wow,
inspiration of
that's
the book, but
great.
the rest is just movies and books.
Yeah, that's actually amazing, really. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And now, Aurelia, apart from Blood Ink, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
Yes, I'm working on part two of Blood Ink. I don't know how to call it yet.
Oh,
So, but it's very early, so it's only a few pages that are done.
that's great. That's great. And being a published author, I'd love to ask you, could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? Are there any challenges you've encountered in the process of writing this book and also ever since it got published?
Yeah, because I'm an indie author, I had to do everything myself. So it really depends on whether you want to choose for that as an
Mm,
author. But when
yeah,
you are an indie author, then it's really challenging to,
hard.
yeah, to technically to do everything yourself, because you need to make
Yeah.
the cover, and I was not great at designing things. So I can show you technically the old version of Blood Ink. Just give me a moment.
Yeah, I love to do that. I love to see that.
Let's see. Well, technically I had two drafts.
Ah,
Let's see.
I hope your Zoom setting will allow us to see it very well.
Yeah,
I hope
it's
so.
let's see
Uh-oh.
this
There's a way to turn
uh
it that way. You do
should
it this
this
way.
way. Yeah. So this was
Yeah,
the
I have seen
first
it.
draft, and it was horrible, as you can see.
Oh,
Well, maybe not horrible, but it was too pink. So I was like, okay, if this is blood ink, you cannot make it pink. And
it
then
has
I
to
was
be
like,
red,
okay,
Blood ink.
yeah, there's also wait here.
Okay, there's a second
Um,
one.
yeah, and there are like flowers and
This is blue.
petals on it. So that was also
Triangle.
too girlish for the uh yeah, for the blood ink. So
It's
and
it's the
that's how I was
girlish.
like, okay, we need to go yeah, a bit more bloody-ish.
A bit
Um
more heroic. I don't know if there's
yeah,
a word like that. Horror like,
yeah,
you know,
perfect. Dark fantasy-ish.
murder
And
like, murder. It's in the process of committing murder, you get to find blood spilling everywhere. So
yeah.
that's like murder like cover. Yeah,
So yeah,
that's
it's
great, really.
yeah, the design of the book that was that took a long time. Also the type of pages, that was also you have like the cream type of paper or the white type of paper. And
Oh.
first I was doubting between the two, so I had to print multiple books in order to test what I liked. So it was
Mm.
really something you had to choose yourself, design
Yeah.
yourself, and also typos or grammar in the
Yeah.
Dutch version, for instance. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, I'm good at Dutch. It's my native language, but still there are
Oh.
will be typos and spelling errors. So yeah, if I want to give advice also to other authors, is if you are an indie author and you have a gigantic Microsoft Word file, just
Mm.
put everything in a tool where you can take out all the grammar and the typos, because Microsoft Word doesn't pick up all the typos.
Mm.
So that was the first draft I did check manually by eye. And then I published the first version, and then one of the first people that read the book, and that was really horrible, said, "Okay, there are a lot of typos in here, but other
Wow.
than that, the book is fine." So I was like,
Wow.
"Okay, that's it's feedback. It's great to hear, but yeah, it's then you just read the book 10 times over, and there are
Mm.
still typos and grammar errors, and so
Wow.
just I had to use a tool. It was such a big file. You can just not get all the typos out in a manual way. So that was really a challenge.
Mm.
Um, but the English version went okay because um, I don't know, it's easier to copy the book or translate the book whenever you are writing
Yeah.
in English, because English is based on grammar. It's a very easy language compared to Dutch. So that's why
Mm.
that one was nearly flawless. I also used the tool to get the grammar mistakes or whatever out, but I nearly didn't get any mistakes in there. So that was great. But you had to
Yeah.
do everything yourself. Um, yeah, and also promote it. It's very hard to do it. So
Yeah.
eventually I just gave up on promoting.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, um, also at first I was really into well, maybe, yeah, getting paid eventually for the book. That's of
Wow.
course a goal, but later on I was like, yeah, you publish the book and just be happy what you've achieved, and just lay back for a few months, just
Mm.
relax a little bit, and be proud of yourself of what you've achieved writing a whole book. So that's why I stopped promoting Blood Ink actively. Every now and
Mm.
then I do still post, but because you really need to post nearly every day, um, yeah, it's really hard to keep posting. Hey, have you read Blood Ink? Hey, have you read Blood Ink?
I
Hey, have you read
understand.
Blood Ink? So
Yeah.
it's not fun anymore to promote. So I
Mm.
was like, just um, leave it like this, and we'll see later on if people catch up on the book or not. So
Mm.
that's why also I'm very glad for this opportunity, because it's like a much nicer way to see you and hear you talk about the book, and then people can get an
Absolutely.
idea of the book. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's much easier way to talk about Blood Ink than to post a
Yeah.
stupid message every now and then. So
Yeah. It's my pleasure, really. And I love your take on this. Thank you for mentioning and thank you so much for sharing. Sounds quite lovely to me. And now, as a published author, Aurelia, what sort of advice do you offer other writers who are struggling to writing and publishing a book in your genre? What would you advise people in this category?
whenever you are done with your book and you are in your last phase, like
Yeah,
before publishing, really use, well, as an indie author, it depends on whether you are indie or at the publisher, because the publisher will do everything for you.
yeah,
But whenever you are an independent author, then really use um, tools or software to take out the grammar mistakes and take it easy with publishing. Because, for instance, when I published the book for the first time, I said, "Hey guys, it's available." And then everyone went to Amazon or to bol.com. Turned out that it was not available yet. So it was
Oh.
not, it was on the Amazon website, but it was not available. So then at a certain point, you just need to wait until it's really online, until you can really order it.
Mm.
Um, and then tell people, because there are hundreds, maybe even of thousands and maybe even millions of books on the internet.
Yeah.
So nobody will find your book at the first few days.
Mm.
So it's my really my advice in the last few stages. Really check your grammar with the tools, because otherwise you're yeah,
Mm.
you're getting in trouble. Um, and yeah, really wait until it's online and then start promoting your book. In it for the money, but you can also go to Goodreads. That's a website, maybe you've heard of it, where you can, it's just actually like Facebook, then you can review and rate books. So there's a very
Yeah.
large book community. So really get yourself registered there as an author, and really connect with the readers, and say,
Mm.
"Hey, have you read this book?" Or "I recommend this book." So yeah, you need to promote it in, yeah, in a
Yeah.
way. It may be a very annoying way, but yeah, there are several ways, and I would rather do it via Goodreads.
Yeah, thank you so much, really. Thank you so much for your advice. And I'm hoping that viewers would love to utilize it. Thank you for mentioning. And just in case we have some interested viewers who are currently watching this interview, I would love to get a copy of Blood Ink. On what platform is it available on for purchase?
It's on Amazon, definitely amazon.uk.com,
Mm,
and also the Amazon from Australia and many others in Europe, but it's not yet available on Amazon.com, because I published it via a Dutch website, and that is why it's not
mm.
allowed to be available via
Oh,
Amazon.com.
that's
So that's a
great.
pity, because
Yeah.
otherwise everyone could get a copy, but you can get it via, I think, also other websites and ship it anywhere in the world. So if you want a copy, or you can get a digital copy, that's even faster. Then you can go to
Mm.
ships. I forgot the name of the website. Kobo.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm
Kobo.
sorry. I forgot the
Yeah.
name. Kobo. So that's the easiest part, and then you can read it immediately. It's cheaper and it's also greener, because you don't have any shipping of the book. So it's also,
That's
yeah,
great. That's
more
great.
economical.
And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Aurelia Young Blood Ink directly on Amazon and also another platform. So thank you so much, Aurelia, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's awesome having this conversation with you.
Thank you very much for this invitation, and for the for this lovely conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well. That was fun.